Hello, everyone. My name is Weston. I'm joined with Evan, and we are here for the first episode of the Rangers Gameplan podcast, a podcast discussing what the past few games have been for the New York Rangers. Today, we're going to briefly discuss the Montreal game, but mainly the meat and potatoes of this is going to be the Buffalo and Pittsburgh back to back over the weekend. Without further ado,
What's going on, guys? Yeah, definitely a pretty interesting weekend. Thursday kicked it off. They they didn't have a lead in the past three games. So they won two of them. They got 5 out of 6 possible points, so it's not completely doom and gloom. But at the end of the day, they only have one regulation win in 12 games. So the panic meter isn't exactly zero. Especially considering you kind of wanted to see a little bit more in the Montreal and Buffalo game specifically. They're not terrible, terrible teams, but if you look at this roster, you're kind of just waiting for them to get comfortable, and it hasn't happened yet, and time's kind of running down here on the season. So
the Montreal game specifically, I will say, very much felt like they were just not really taking that game seriously, and they had so much time off going into it. Because it felt
yeah,
every
yeah.
time Montreal would score, Rangers would just go absolutely wild skating until they'd tie it and then just completely lapse again. Which,
Yeah, for sure. There was definitely a lot of rust there. But it's one of those things where the goals they gave up in that game were, kind of it shows how bad the defense has been for, going on a month now, maybe a little over a month. And a big chunk of that has been when they're playing with, a short roster, all those things, but it's not like the Rangers are the most defensively sound team in the world when they have their full lineup. So it's not necessarily an excuse. They're not great defensively regardless, to be honest. So it's, going into these playoffs, whether it's New Jersey, Carolina, you got to be a lot better. You absolutely have to be a lot better, especially in that Montreal game. You really don't want to see that many quality chances given up, considering they're obviously not a great team that's also very injured. Their top players literally weren't playing, so you would have liked to see them lock it down a little bit more. Obviously, rust plays a factor into that, but this has been going on for way too long that there's not many excuses to go around for that type of stuff. So,
I know you've had the theory or the opinion for a little bit now, especially from last season coming into this one, but Igor's regression, he's not bad by any means, and I'm not going to say anything of that sort, but Igor Shesterkin not playing at that Vesna level has just, this season for the defense, been disastrous. They have not been the worst defensive team, but they're below average defensively, which when
yeah,
you
I
have
mean, it's not like they get completely steamrolled constantly defensively, but the chances they do give up are always grade A chances.
yeah,
It's not. They might not give up 50 shots, but the 30 shots they give up are just really,
it's
they just come from complete defensive breakdowns.
it's men alone in front, it's massive screens or odd man rushes. And last year, Igor Shesterkin somehow was able to stop nearly all of them. And I will talk about Igor in a minute here, especially on that Buffalo game. But
Hmm.
the defense, especially now missing Ryan Lingrid, where Nico Mikkola is having to play over 20 minutes a game, is
Yeah, yeah,
it's frightening, especially with the fact heading into the playoffs. It's just a fact you're going to have injuries,
yeah,
and
absolutely. Yeah,
that is a nerve-wracking thing heading into it because you lose one defenseman, this is your defensive lineup. If you lose one, if
yeah,
Lingard
and
goes down, which Iron Man last season, so I'm not.
and I think he's missed this many games partially because they want to make sure he's not at 100%. They want to make sure he's at 120%. You know what I'm saying? At the same time, it's one of those things where, it's even when he's in the lineup, they're not they're not the Boston Bruins. They're not completely locking teams down. So, like you said, there's going to be injuries in the playoffs. And the forwards have to do more defensively.
Oh my
Absolutely.
lord.
It's not like they don't have the capability of it. Mika Zibanejad has shown, maybe not consistently, but he's certainly shown he is one of the top two-way players in this league. And I mean, some nights he really shows that, and other nights, so, I mean, kind of like in the Pittsburgh game, he really didn't have that. I mean, one of the goals went off of him for Pittsburgh, and he took a bad penalty in the first that led to a 5-on-3. And some nights you just don't see that. You have to see the defensive consistency from a lot of these guys. I mean, Kreider could play defense. Um, I'd honestly say 75% of the reason Vincent Trocheck was signed here is because of how good his forechecking was. And it's not that he's necessarily been bad at it here, but I don't think we've necessarily seen what we expected from him. I mean, in that Rangers versus Hurricane series, he was all over the ice. I mean, you know, he was all up and down the ice making plays. He made it really tough for the Rangers, and I just haven't seen that as much from him in a Rangers uniform. There's a lot of blame to go around. I'm not necessarily trying to pin it on, one or two guys, but it's one of those things where, you know, chemistry isn't an excuse. I mean, there's three new players on this team. Everyone else was here last year, and they weren't great defensively last year. They're probably, just at the same level, if not worse, defensively this year. So something's got to change, and I don't necessarily know what. But they're running out of time to click here before the playoffs start.
Yeah, if I'm not mistaken, Pittsburgh was game 66, so you're really in that. This is when you need to be ironing out every kink, oiling up every gear to be as good as you possibly can be going into the playoffs. And you have a 12-game stretch leading into the final little bit where you've won one game in regulation. And to be fair, that was a very impressive game. That was a great game against the Kings, who, because the West is an absolute shit show, might end up winning the West, which is wild to me. And you go there on the second night of a back-to-back. Granted, it was back in Madison Square Garden, but the second night of a back-to-back and run their show. That was a great game. But overall, this stretch of 12 games has not inspired confidence. And the last three, I do not recall a time where in 3 games you've had all 3 be on the road, and then the second and third be a back-to-back with travel, both, again, on the road. You get 5 of 6, and you're like, man, they're looking rough right now. And the how is very important. The Montreal game was a mess. The Buffalo game was a bit better, but mainly what won you the Buffalo game was Igor Shesterkin, and almost him alone.
Yeah.
That was the first game. I'm not going to say the first game this season because recency bias is a big thing. But that was the first game in a long time that I can think of off the top of my head where you won that game simply because the Rangers had Igor Shesterkin and the opposing team did not. That was
absolutely.
His finest game in a while.
Yeah, they didn't play completely horrible in that game, but it was like I was saying before, where they didn't give up 60 shots, but every time Buffalo got in the Rangers zone, it was a grade A opportunity. And I mean, especially in the last 10 minutes of that third period, I didn't think they were going to win that game. I mean, Igor completely stood on his head there. And I mean, he's definitely got a lot of slack, coming into this year. And it's one of those things, I mean, in terms of him specifically, we all said last year that no goalie was going to have that type of season again. And I don't know why we're necessarily surprised that he's not having that season again. You know what I'm saying? He definitely struggled in the past month or so. He's gotten a lot better since that, since a lot of the trades happened in this break. Obviously, he was phenomenal in that Buffalo game, but there was a good little stretch where he was struggling. But everything outside of that, he hasn't been bad this year. And a lot of the goals given up are just complete defensive breakdowns. And, especially it's not just him being the sole reason for a lot of these points. Jaro Halak has had to have a lot of outstanding performances, especially yesterday. I mean, in that Pittsburgh game, they don't win that game if he wasn't on it. And it's one of those things, especially in terms of the Rangers defense, you'd like to see a lot more improvement. I mean, they looked really, really, really bad when obviously Mikkola and Ben Harper were playing 25, 30 minutes a night. So that obviously can't happen, right? You're not expecting to beat teams like the Bruins when you have guys like that playing that many minutes. But they haven't been playing, shorthanded all year. This
Mm.
has been an issue all season long, and you know, it's what coming down this stretch here, you kind of got to start feeling good about this team at some point. I mean, the power play's got to get rolling. This is the time of year where you want to start feeling good about your chances, and the Rangers really have not provided that for us. Obviously, it's not completely doom and gloom. They've had some good moments. They're not losing every game they play. I mean, they had that little losing streak there. It is what it is. At the end of the day, they're pretty comfortable in third in the Metro. They obviously got a 5 out of possible 6 points this weekend, but it's what a lot of reoccurring issues for this team. There's not any improvement. And just to touch on the Penguins game yesterday, I mean, that's a team that you just played a 7-game series against. You played them 4 times last year. That yesterday was your second meeting with them this year. You got to play them 2 more times this week, and the fact that you can't figure out a way to adjust to their offensive game plan is definitely concerning. I mean, they crash to the net a lot. They like to screen the goalie. A lot of shots from the point, and the Rangers haven't had an answer for that. And when you play a team that often, you'd expect to see a little bit more of an adjustment and a little more improvement against their play style. I mean, that might not be the team we're immediately worried about in the playoffs. Obviously, it's most likely going to be, New Jersey or Carolina, but you never know if you're going to play them. And I know they beat them last year, but, you know, if Louis Domingue was not in net, who knows what happens. I mean, if Crosby doesn't go down, if Louis Domingue wasn't in net, if they had Jari, who knows if that series is over in 5, right? So you'd like to see a little more, improvement and some adjustments from the staff, and I mean on the players as well. Nothing's really changed all season. So
No, it's been a lot of. I will say something that did change yesterday, and it changed in the Buffalo game as well, which is the line changes continue to happen,
yeah, yeah.
and I, you obviously you're a massive fan of Gerard Gallant.
Oh, absolutely. He's my favorite person in the world. Yeah,
You love
for
that man
sure.
very dearly. I I don't understand how you can keep change, especially at this point of the season, how you can continue to change the lines. And you're
Yeah,
gearing up for the
yeah,
playoffs. You need desperately to build that chemistry. You bring in Patrick Kane for the lone reason. You did not bring in Patrick Kane for what he's done this season. And
yeah.
you bring him in because you know the chemistry that he has with Artemi Panarin. And to have them not be on the same line is
It's absurd. I mean,
wild.
they didn't necessarily play phenomenal together, right? But it's just one of those things. I don't know how you could pull the plug on it that fast. And I mean, to dive specifically into this weekend, the past 2 games, the Rangers looked completely out of sorts. I mean, the passes don't look crisp. They have a lot of trouble, breaking out in the neutral zone because these guys don't know where their routes are. And it's one of those things where you're playing these teams, especially the Penguins, that all those guys have been playing together for a very long time. And that lineup doesn't change very much, right? So you're playing against these teams that have a lot of chemistry while your team is trying to build chemistry, and you're almost preventing them from doing that when you change the lines before the game and you change them several times within the game. I mean, like I said, the passes don't look crisp. They really, they aren't able to anticipate where each other are. And I mean, the 5-on-5 play for the Rangers has been an issue for a very long time now. I mean, even if you have guys like, Zibanejad and Kreider playing together on the same line for 10 straight games, chances are their 5v5 numbers are not going to be great within that 10-game stretch. I mean, this team just really has immense difficulty scoring 5v5. And it's not like they don't have the players. They absolutely have the players. I mean, look at the roster, and especially now, the way the top 9 looks, I don't know how they aren't getting more quality scoring chances. And, sometimes, for a game or two, a line will look good together and they never play with each other again. And there's not many games left to find this chemistry. So
I think you just
I you gotta just pick a lineup and just stick with it
yeah,
in
you're
this
kind of
stretch
getting to
here.
that point where you just have to ride it out for better or for worse. I mean, over the weekend, and this is again, the lineup constantly changed in the Buffalo game. It constantly changed in the Penguins game. The best line was Mott, VC, and Gaudreau.
Yeah.
They looked the
I
best.
mean,
And when they look like your best line, when they have the best chemistry, that should be a bit of a red flag for the Rangers. The goal in the Pittsburgh game was that you get in the third period to tie the game was Trocheck to Kreider, and it wasn't any. There was no chemistry involved with that goal. It was Trocheck somehow not getting a penalty on Malkin after putting his elbow into his spinal cord.
If that gets called, the Rangers
way.
don't get a point yesterday.
No.
If he gets called for a penalty there, they lose the game 2-1.
Yeah.
And I mean, oh man, that fourth line was literally the only line that did anything 5v5. And I mean, the positive is, when that line was put together, we expected them to play well. So at least we know they're gelling and they're playing well and they're kind of doing what we expect. We're not going to expect a goal per game or anything close to that from them, but at least they're doing what they're supposed to.
No,
and it's all the other lines, they just get, they get shaken up mid-game and it's like I said before, nothing about it looks smooth. They have no rhythm with each other when that happens, and it just has to stop. And I honestly have no hope for it stopping at this point. I mean, we'll probably be in game 3 or whatever of the playoffs, and we'll still be talking about this. I mean, it happened all season last year. It's just how Gallant is. But I mean, like we said before, they just have to find a lineup and just stick with it the rest of the way. I mean, these guys have chemistry with each other. And, Kreider, Zibanejad, and Tarasenko looked good together. It's not like they didn't get chances. They maybe weren't clicking as much as you would like them to, but the way to get them to click is to get them to play more, So Panarin and Kane, the more they play together, the more they're going to find it and the more the points are going to come. So I don't know why that was broken up so prematurely. And, Patrick Kane, especially in that Buffalo game, he looked awesome. I mean, for sure. Obviously he had his mistakes and everything like that, but that was the first time where I felt he genuinely looked comfortable with the team. He was definitely skating hard, and he didn't look like a lost dog out there like he did in the past few games before then. He definitely looked like he was getting into his rhythm a little bit more. And then immediately gets thrown on 4 different lines within those 2 games. So it's especially tough for a guy like that. You're on a new team and you don't know what line you're going to be playing on every 6 minutes. It's really tough.
It absolutely, like, he looked fantastic in the Buffalo game. He had his moments in the Montreal game. The Buffalo game was, I think, I don't want to say the peak because he had 2 point. Did he have 1 point? Excuse me. He didn't have a point on the OT winner. I think that's sort of his ceiling, which is a very fine ceiling. He's going to have a couple of miscues here and there, but you knew that going into acquiring Patrick Kane at this point in his career, where he might have an injury. We don't know. There's the rumors floating around about the hip. He's 32. He's never been a defensive monster. And if that's what you get from Patrick Kane, was in that Buffalo game or around there, you're more than happy with that. And they've had their moments. The biggest problem with the Rangers team, and there was to that an extent last year, they pass really well. No one wants to finish. And I think it was an issue last season of the kids line not wanting to take a shot and mess up. And now it's a case of the entirety of the team plays a little bit too unselfishly, to where they're passing up these prime opportunities to take shots, these prime looks, to hope something better has come along, and it kind of hasn't. They have tons and tons of great looks that just result in nothing. And then you also have the egregious misses, which have become too much of a staple with this team over the past couple of years. Thank you, Mr. Ryan Strome, for putting those in our head.
Yeah. Oh, dear God. Oh, my God. Yeah, I mean, specifically in terms of what you just said, it's, I mean, especially on the power play, right? At this point, I don't know what they have to do to fix it. They obviously aren't shooting. They're trying to do a little too much. But the thing we know is it's absolutely not a personnel issue. I mean, both of the Rangers' power play units are easily power play 1 on most of the teams in this league, including some playoff teams, right? Either one of them, they're completely star-studded. So obviously they just got changed around. It's not like those units have been playing together forever, but I mean, they're not getting any chances. I mean, in the second period of the Penguins game, they had two power plays in the second, and I think they got maybe one shot. You know, it's just not looking good. They're definitely trying to do a little too much. And all season the power play hasn't necessarily been as automatic. And I mean, they have to figure it out pretty soon because if your power play is cold going into the playoffs, your chances look pretty slim. I mean, that goes for any team. In the playoffs, it comes down to your goaltending and the power play. And I have full confidence in Igor completely finding his way back come playoff time. Obviously, the defense has to get ironed out before then, but I definitely think he's going to steal some games in the playoffs as long as we can get some power play goals here and there.
Yeah,
Um, you know, I guess it's on the bright side. At least we know it's not a personnel issue. So we definitely have hope of them turning it around. If we didn't have all these superstars on the team and it was kind of just, it is what it is with the power play, then I'd be a lot more concerned, right? But they just got to find a way to put the puck in the net. And I mean, more importantly, they just have to figure out a way to become less predictable. I mean, everything with the Rangers power play is completely east to west. They're always looking for that cross ice pass. And, you're playing in the NHL. These teams watch film, they pick up on things. They're gonna, they're gonna pick up on that eventually. It caught up to them pretty quick this year. And, Kreider had that 50-goal season last year because he's the best net front guy in the league. Maybe, Pavelski's up there. But it's been Kreider for a while now. I mean, that's always been his office right in front of the net. He's great at tipping the puck, and they just haven't tried it as much this year. Last year with the power play, they were looking for the one-timer to Mika, or if that wasn't available, Fox would, shoot it on net, and Kreider would most likely tip it in. They just haven't tried that this year, and I don't know why. It's not like they completely aren't, going for that chance with Kreider in front, but it's just not. It doesn't seem as much in the game plan as it was last year. And I mean, like I said before, they don't have much time to figure this power play out. They just had their break, so you would have liked to see a little more improvement on the power play considering they had that break before the Montreal game, but it just, it hasn't happened yet. So,
you've come into a point now. Like the next week is incredibly important. You play Washington, Pittsburgh twice, and Nashville, which Nashville's having a bit of a down season. They're not what I think a lot of people thought Nashville might be coming into the season.
mm-hmm.
You're playing solid teams. You're not playing teams that are great or top 10. They're teams that might make the playoffs or they might not. But this is going to be a nice little stretch where anything you get doesn't have to come with a caveat or a caveat. Caveat? Caveat's the word I'm looking for.
Yeah.
Of, well, yeah, you did that, but it was against this team. Ergo, it's null and void. Like the game against Philly, the game against Montreal, where you win both of those, but, well, yeah, but it's a subpar team. You're playing solid teams, and you're playing teams more than that are going to be playing at their best because they desperately, desperately need any point possible. You have Pittsburgh, who's clinging on to a playoff spot by just a couple of points over Florida. Washington is 5 points out behind the Islanders, and Nashville is 5 points out from Colorado. So you have a schedule coming up, and they're all at home. They're all in Madison Square Garden.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Which you'd hope 3 of the 4 can go your way.
At the very least. I mean, if you really want to start feeling good about this team, you'd like them to get all 4, right? At the end of the day, it's not like you're playing the Boston Bruins this week. They've struggled against the Capitals this year, but the Rangers are better than the Capitals, and I mean, the same goes for the Penguins. They just have to find a way to pull these games out. Obviously, none of them are bad teams, but in this final stretch, you want to really start feeling good about your chances. You want them to really start to click together. So this week is it. I mean, especially for the standings. I mean, as we sit here and talk today, they're comfortable in third, right? But if they lose both these games to the Penguins, that starts to change.
Yeah.
If they lose, against the Capitals, and then if they, either lose both to the Penguins or lose one and then maybe an overtime loss, that's still not great. You definitely want 2 regulation wins against them. And there's no reason they can't. I mean, like I said before, they're absolutely better than these teams. I mean, not just on paper, they're clearly ahead of them in the standings. So, hopefully they're a little bit angry about the loss to the Penguins yesterday. They seem to be pretty fired up about it yesterday. Talking about it afterwards. So hopefully that lights a little bit of a fire under them. But we'll see. I mean, like I said, as we're sitting here right now, they're fine in third place, but that could very, very quickly change. I mean, they used to have, a substantial margin over the, Islanders and Penguins. Now, not so much. So they really have to start putting some points together here.
It's narrowed to the point now. You both have played 66 games. If the Rangers beat the Capitals, but then drop both to the Penguins, all of a sudden, that insurmountable, you're locked into third in the Metropolitan is a 2 point difference,
Yeah,
which
yeah.
is
I mean,
terrifying to
yeah,
look at.
and it's especially because you really wanted to see them truly play to their potential after these trades happened. And I mean, I know they're going to get Lindgren back, but you shouldn't be relying on one guy to, completely carry your defense. I mean, they've looked completely abysmal recently. I know you have, Mikkola and Harper playing more minutes than you would like, but I mean, injuries are going to happen in the playoffs. And if you can't figure it out, with one of your guys down, that's a serious issue. I mean, even with Lindgren out, you still have a Norris winning defenseman. And I mean, Keandre Miller's had some great moments this year, which I mean, by the way, he struggled a lot recently.
Oh
I mean,
God,
we saw
yes.
that a lot. I mean, especially this weekend. I don't see much of a change in his game necessarily because he does like to step up in the play and pinch. But he's just not, you know, forcing turnovers now. I mean, usually when he did that, it's he's always been a very risky player in the neutral zone, but all season he was able to come through. I mean, now, especially in this past month or so, he's not coming up with those takeaways in the neutral zone when he steps up, and it leads to a 2-on-1 the other way. And at some point that obviously falls on him, but that's also on the coaching. I mean, if a guy's consistently making the same mistake, you'd like to see some improvement there. I'm obviously not asking for him to change his game. He's not a stay-at-home defenseman or anything like that. He's a very aggressive player, and he has the right to be. It's not like he hasn't had success doing that. But when your team is struggling a little bit and you're playing these tight games, you'd expect the coaches to reel him in a little bit more and tell him not to do things like that. Um, you know, to talk more a little bit about the coaching, I mean, obviously this entire fan base is upset about the line changes and things like that. But in terms of this defense, I mean, I've said this for a very long time. A lot of teams in this league would kill for the Rangers' top four. I mean, their top four defensemen are really, really good. Fox and Lindgren, they're just as good as any pair in the league. And Keandre Miller's obviously, he's a rising star. And I mean, Truba, obviously, this fan base is completely, split down the middle with him. But at the end of the day, he was not that bad in Winnipeg. So all of a sudden, when he comes to New York and there's not, necessarily great defensive coaches, is when things get a little hairy for him. He obviously makes good plays here and there. He's definitely a little overhated, in my opinion. This team would definitely be a complete mess without him or anyone in the top four. So, I mean, you could hate on Trouba all you want, but I mean, this last stretch where you've seen Mikkola and Harper play all these minutes, that should show you if you take a guy like Trouba out, you're just going to have to deal with that again. So, he's definitely an important, piece of this team. That being said, to go back to my original point, there's no reason this team should be this bad defensively when you have that good of a top four. I mean, a lot of teams don't have the luxury of having a Norris winning defenseman on their team, and they just shouldn't be this defensively irresponsible when you clearly have the guys to play well, in their own zone. That's all I'm saying. I mean, the forward line changes are a problem in their in its own right. But the fact that you just haven't really seen much defensive improvement at all this season is definitely concerning to me. I mean, last year maybe you could have the excuse that it's a new coaching staff, a lot, a pretty young team still, all those things, but they played all last season together. They had a deep playoff run and they just still can't click defensively. I mean, that's just inexcusable to me for sure.
It's a massive issue because a lot of the players we've given, Keandre Miller, and I'm not saying Keandre Miller's the start of it because he absolutely isn't. He's a very good defenseman. The sky's the limit for him. The last little stretch, he's been quite shaky. Fox has turned into a pumpkin ever since Ryan Lindgren went down with injury.
Yeah.
Ryan Lindgren's been gone, so I can't really say anything about him. I think Jacob Trouba, since Ryan Lindgren went down, has massively stepped up on the blue line.
Hmm.
I think the weekend especially, he played a very solid game, especially in Buffalo. I thought he was fantastic. But you
Yeah.
have the players aren't young anymore. They're still younger, but this is the second full season, more or less, or the second season he's played. He played a little bit last season. Schneider's gotten a lot more playing time. Miller, this is his
Hmm.
third year. It's Miller or Fox and Lindgren's fourth, and Truba's a vet. He's the captain of the team. And then Mikola has been in the league for a bit. Harper, if I'm not mistaken, has been in the league for a bit. These you can't use the excuse anymore. And you could last year of, oh well, they're just so young. Give them a little bit of time to develop. They've gotten that, and a
Yeah,
lot of the
absolutely.
rookie mistakes, a lot of the oh that'll disappear in time, have not disappeared in time.
Yeah. Hmm.
And that's when you have those issues originally. When they're young, that's on the player. But now you've gotten to the point, they've all been here a while. They've all played, in some cases, well over 100 games. If you're not fixing this, it's not the player anymore. It's on the coaching staff to correct these mistakes. And that's the thing. These are correctable mistakes that they make. It's they step at the wrong time, they pinch at the
Yeah.
wrong time, or they just completely forget to move people in front of the net. Because, especially the past month, I have not seen as many just. There have been multiple goals where Fox or Truba or Miller have just been standing in front of a defenseman who's asked to face in front of Halak or Shesterkin. And it's
Yeah. Hmm.
wild.
Yeah, and I mean, especially with guys like that. I mean, Adam Fox, you're a Norris winning defenseman. He obviously doesn't have the size, but you'd like to at least see them recognize that there's a player in front. I mean, I feel like that doesn't happen enough. I mean, Truba, that's kind of his wheelhouse is right in front of the net with those, net front battles. He's a very physical player, and you really don't want to see him either missing that assignment completely or just, getting completely bodied out of the front. I mean, that can't happen. I mean, the overtime winner, for the Penguins, I know it was a power play in overtime and everything, but you know, all three Penguins goals were, Halak couldn't see the puck, and that just can't be happening. I mean, um, it was an issue last year, and it's not getting any better. And I mean, it's not completely on the defenseman. Obviously, the forwards have to step up, massively. I mean, their 5v5 struggles, it's a completely a team effort. I mean, like you said before, there's not many young guys on this team. There are, but the majority of this makeup is veteran players that have been doing this for a while. And like I said, at the beginning, um, there's three new players on this team. Everyone else has a lot of chemistry together. So the fact that they look this disoriented is very concerning, especially that, we're going into game, what, 67, so it has to get ironed out very quick. Like I said a little bit before, hopefully that loss to the Penguins lights a bit of a fire under them. I mean, those are two teams that don't like each other whatsoever. Obviously, we saw it yesterday. It was a very, very physical game. Um, you play them twice at home this week. You'd like to see a lot of adjustments to that team specifically because, like I was saying before, you've played that team a lot. I mean, they have a very distinct offensive um, scheme, right? So they're going to send a lot of bodies to the net, and it's the shots most likely coming from the point. They like to score their goals from a screen, and if that doesn't happen, they're poking away at rebounds. And the fact that we're just letting them completely have free reign in front of the net, especially being that this is not your first rodeo with this team. You just had a long, drawn out playoff series with them, and that was your second meeting, um, and you just haven't been able to adjust to them. That's on the coaching more than anything to me. I mean, obviously, that obviously definitely falls on the players a little bit, but the fact that you just completely cannot have an answer for their offensive game plan is definitely concerning. I mean, all three of those goals yesterday were completely preventable, and it was because Yaro Halak could not see the hockey puck, and that's not what you want. I mean, obviously, screen goals are going to happen. This is the NHL. Guys are going to find their way in front of the net. I'm not saying the crease should be completely clear all the time, because even the Boston Bruins don't have that happen, in front of Allmark all the time. I mean, they obviously 99% of the time, but it's just not something that's going to happen in this league. Um, you know, that's where the Rangers seem to struggle the most. I mean, a lot of the chances are obviously, odd man rushes and things like that, but when you're constantly getting bodied out in front of the net, that's just not what you want to see, considering the fact that it's not, it's not like you have Zach Jones back there getting bodied out by, a 6'5" player. You don't want to see Jacob Trouba get completely bodied out or just completely neglect the guy in front. That's just stuff that can't be happening. And, I mean, like we've said multiple times, they don't have much time to fix this. So who knows what's going to happen, but something has to improve, pretty soon.
I think the positive of this week, I think there's a lot. You have all 4 games at home. It's teams that you really have a lot of motivation to beat. And at
Hmm.
least for the first 3, ideally, you could have Shesterkin go in all 3 of them and then give Halak the Nashville game. You're probably getting Lingard back, and because by game's end in Pittsburgh, you had already switched up the lines, you would imagine going into the game tomorrow, you're going to have the lines back to uh, Tarasenko, Kreider, and Mika on the first line, Panarin, Kane, and Trocheck on the second line, the kids line, and then the grinding line.
Yeah.
Which, if you can go in with that, you have your defenseman back. This could be the week you right the ship. I think there's
Yeah. And
a lot of
it
potential to do
definitely
so.
has to, they, like we said before, they definitely just have to pick a lineup and just let it ride out. I
Yeah.
mean, Um, I don't know why they kind of split it up so prematurely. But you don't have the time to be shaking things up at this point. I mean,
Also, you're not going to
during that,
threaten them with it. Like you're not bringing in Kane to put him with
yeah,
Heedle and Trocheck. He's
yeah,
not going to buy that. He knows why he's there. He's there to be paired with Artemi Panarin.
yeah. I mean,
There's
that's
not the.
obviously 90% of the reason why he wanted to come here in the first place. And the line changes. It's just like I said before. They're probably just going to keep happening. I mean, the game against the Capitals, the lines will probably be changed 3 times unless the Rangers just completely dominate that game. Hopefully they do, obviously. But it's just one of those things where if you look at this lineup, regardless of whatever the line mix-up is, there's too much talent to not be getting quality scoring chances 5v5. There's just no excuse for it. Um, Obviously a little bit of it is on the players. I mean, you have a lot of guys here that have the ability to take over a game that aren't right now. Um, but at the same time, it's very difficult for the players to get into any sort of rhythm when they don't know what line they're going to be on, even shift by shift. So, um, that the players have openly said to the media multiple times that they don't like the constant line changes. I don't think any hockey player ever would enjoy that. So, um, we hope that it's going to stop, but I really don't think it will. Regardless, I just don't know how this team has struggled so heavily 5v5 for the past 2 seasons. They obviously have the players to do it, and they're just not clicking. Like I said, earlier, even if you kind of ride a lineup out for a little while, chances are they're not really going to dominate 5v5,
Mhm.
for at least more than one game. They don't necessarily have these streaks of games where they just look completely dominant as a team, which that just shouldn't be happening. I mean, there's just no excuse for that when you have this much talent on the roster.
Well, there's that much, and it's that deep as well. I would say it's not that you have
Yeah.
one incredible line, and then the other 3 are kind of scrub. You have 3 genuine great lines. And the fourth line is they're not going to go get a goal every game, but they're going to consistently try to drive play in the other way. They do it pretty well, and they're not liable defensively at all. Like, the fourth line plays a great defensive game. And getting Mott back, I thought he's looked wonderful defensively the past few games. Gaudreau consistently has been a very good defensive forward for the team. Jimmy Vesey coming back and being as good as he has been this season has just been wild to me.
Absolutely. I did not see Jimmy Vesey being that good whatsoever.
He's been a good penalty killer. Like, he's been one of the
yeah,
top.
I mean, if not the best penalty killer for sure. I mean, he's always had a good defensive side to his game, but this year it's been absolutely insane. I mean, he's probably the best 5v5 defender on the team. I mean, obviously out of the forwards, speaking solely from the forwards, obviously you have, Adam Fox, but Jimmy Vesey's been everything and more that they expected from him. And that contract extension, I think he's making what, like 950K
Yeah.
for 3 years.
That
I mean,
fourth
that's a
line
steal.
is getting paid like maybe $7 or $8 million, and they are
Yeah.
magnificent.
Yeah.
As
And
far as fourth lines are concerned, it's
And I mean, in terms of Barclay Goodrow, it's he gets a lot of hate, and I feel like a lot of that hate came from when he was playing in the top six, and you really don't expect him to do anything of significance in the top six. I mean, he's obviously not, the best defensive player in the league, but he's a very, very good role player. I mean, you saw it; he won 2 cups with Tampa, just based on being a very, elite grinding forward. That's always been the makeup of his game. So he gets a lot of hate, but him on that fourth line is the perfect fit for him. And obviously Tyler Mott chases every loose puck on the ice. So that fourth line is absolutely insane.
I wanted to pull it up because I do think it is quite funny with all the hate that he's gotten while being a New York Ranger. Last season, he had a career high in points. His previous career high was 26 when he was on San Jose and then the Lightning in 2019-20. Last year, he had 33. This year, he has 25. So unless he goes the last 14 games without getting a point, he will have the 2 best point seasons of his career in New York. He's been perfectly fine. He's been good defensively. He's been good on the penalty kill. Outside of his little funny little stint last year in the top 6, I have not had anything to complain about Barclay Goodrow.
Yeah, I mean, he's doing exactly what they brought him here for. So I don't, you know, guys like him get a lot of hate when it just shouldn't be directed towards him. I mean, this team is not going to win or lose games because of Barclay Goodrow. And I mean, that being said, they almost won the game yesterday because of Barclay Goodrow and his line. So, obviously there's that, that contradicts itself there, but he's doing exactly what you want him to. So, I mean, obviously you'd maybe like to have him making a little less money, but he's not completely breaking the bank, and he's doing everything you ask of him. So it's the blame and the issues direct more farther up in the lineup for sure.
I don't know where to go from here. I think we've covered it.
Yeah, pretty much covered all the bases. I mean, the one thing I will say is, in the Penguins game yesterday, I did like how they fought in the third. They were without a doubt the better team in the third period. But with that being said, they lose that game if Trocheck gets called on that cross check. So
Yeah.
as good as their third period was, it wasn't like they scored 4 goals in it. They definitely still struggle to put the puck in the net. So,
Again, you can't go into the playoffs thinking if you play one good period out of the 3, you're going to win anything.
Yeah, for sure. And I feel like that's been a trend for a lot of this season. They've been really bad in the second period, at least in the past month or so. And that can't be happening. I mean, they get completely dominated in the second period, which just simply can't happen. Especially when you're playing against, let's say the first round matchup is the Devils. You will get killed. If they are a very, very fast team, and if you if you're, not on your game for a period, they will score multiple goals. That's the thing. I mean, obviously, Igor is we everybody, has full confidence in him, um fully finding his elite form in the playoffs, but you don't want to rely on that. Especially with how good this team is on paper.
Hmm.
Obviously Tarasenko and Kane aren't defensive masterminds. They never will be. But you also don't need them to be. I mean, how many teams in this league have four, right wingers that play elite defense? Nobody, right? So most teams have, defensive liabilities at wing. It's not, a new thing. It's not solely the Rangers. And like I said before, you don't need them to be crazy defensively because you're supposed to have great defensive players on your team. You have Zibanejad, you have Truba, Miller, Lindgren, Fox, obviously. You shouldn't need those guys to do anything defensively, really. But it's more of a team wide thing, and I just feel like their defensive structure is not improving whatsoever, and that's definitely concerning.
Uh, how much do you think the defense can improve? Like, assuming once Lingard is back and healthy, the past 2 weeks, the way the defense is played, it's going to get better. I think a lot of people go and expect Lingard coming back, and they're going to be the Boston Bruins. They're not, but it's definitely going to improve when you get Ryan
Yeah.
Lingard back.
I mean, obviously, like you said, it's going to improve, and it's going to improve drastically. I mean, I don't think you're going to see as many odd man rushes when he's back, just because obviously all of your pairings will have a lot of chemistry, and a lot of those things will, kind of iron themselves out. Um, but I mean, like you said, they're not going to be the Boston Bruins. They weren't last year. They haven't been at all this year. So anybody expecting that definitely have some bad news for you. Um, in terms of your question, how much do I think the defense can improve? It's not like we haven't seen them defend before. I mean, they've obviously had very dominant games. Um, One game I will go back to is game one of the season against Tampa. They obviously, that was the best game I've seen this team play ever. I mean, this core of players, they completely dominated that game. So when I feel like when they're all really trying their absolute hardest, that's their maximum potential right there. Um, Whether they're going to hit that consistently, I have no clue. But like I said, they have the ability to do it. Obviously, game one was a complete, masterclass from this team, but there's been many instances where they've done things like that. They just don't do it consistently. In the playoffs last year, there were, many games where they were pretty dominant. Maybe not the whole game, but they have the ability to really flip a switch and at least win two of the three periods and not give up many, quality scoring chances. They have the, ability to do it. We've seen them do it multiple times. Um, they just have to figure out how to do it consistently, especially against anybody you're going to play in the playoffs. I mean, this Eastern Conference is absolutely insane. So you have to be really, really good defensively. You got to get everything clicking here in this week and down this final stretch.
You mentioned game one, and I just wanted to briefly say that I think there is a possibility. I'm not saying to bank on it because it's very possible that maybe it isn't that. This team has played the majority of the year like they don't care whatsoever about the regular season. They just want to get back to the playoffs. That game against the Lightning was awe-inspiring. How thoroughly, for the
Absolutely.
60 minutes they played, they walked them up and down the ice on no uncertain terms. And I think you could see the entirety of the team flip a switch going in game one of the playoffs and just potentially start running away with it. Because when they play like they care, it's something wild. And that game against
Yeah.
Tampa was utterly dominant. And I think that could be. It's weird to say. Oh, disregard the other 81 games they played. That first game, no. That's the team you're gonna get come postseason. But I really
Yeah.
think that could be
Yeah.
the case with them.
Yeah, I mean, that definitely has been the case pretty much all season long. I mean, they got off to that slow start and they kind of realized that they couldn't just waltz their way into the playoffs. They actually had to fight for some points. And now, they're obviously sitting pretty comfortable in third, right now
Hmm.
because of that. They obviously picked it up. I mean, they went what 24-4, so it's not like, it's not like the sky is falling here. I mean, it's not so long ago that they were on that dominant run. But the one thing I will say, especially in these past three games, is that the effort has not been there. And you know, early in the season, you can get away with not caring as much and kind of thinking only about getting back to the playoffs. But this is the home stretch. You really want to see them fighting like every other team is fighting right now. Um, every team in the East, in the playoff race is absolutely fighting their absolute hardest. I mean, you especially saw that on Saturday with Buffalo. They were going hard. The Rangers didn't have an answer for it, and they somehow walked away with 2 points. But that just goes to show the gap in effort between the Rangers and all the other teams in the playoff race right now. Um, you saw a little bit of more effort yesterday and fight from this team, at least in the third period yesterday. Um, but it hasn't been there in the past month, and it's very concerning, being that we don't have many games left before this really counts.
Also, like you look at the playoff picture, you're playing likely the Devils in the first round. Devils are gonna have
Hmm.
home ice. From there, you look at the rest of the teams. The Eastern Conference is going to be a bloodbath, and if you don't go into every game mentally prepared for a war, you're going to get killed.
Yeah,
Like
absolutely.
you are sixth in the entire Eastern Conference. You're eighth in the league. That's how good.
Yeah,
That's how good
yeah.
the East is.
Yeah, and I mean, even if it's not the Devils, I mean, right now the Devils are on a complete heater once again. So let's say they win the division, and let's say we play Carolina again.
Mm.
Um, hey, they really struggled in Carolina last year, apart from that game 7, and I think it's Carolina plays the same way every game. You're not going to really see them. A lack of effort is not necessarily something you're ever going to say about the Carolina Hurricanes right now. Um, and I feel like a lot of their players are a lot more consistent. So it's we talk about consistency and all these things. Carolina is very, very good at matching their lines to the Rangers. We especially saw that in the games on the road in Carolina. I mean, Mika Zibanejad could not do anything in that series because his line was just getting completely shut down. I
Well,
mean, they didn't do absolutely anything. So
the biggest thing
if
about
if
that.
it
No, finish
yeah,
it.
go ahead.
The biggest thing about that going into Carolina is you're going to have to win off of your sheer talent alone because you're going to get
Hmm.
outclassed entirely in coaching.
Yeah,
Rod Brindamore he is the father of Gerard Gallant, and we learned that last season in that
absolutely.
7-game series.
Yeah,
And so if
yeah.
you play Carolina in round 1, you're going to have to win simply because your players play better. And you're not going to get any help from the coaching staff. You have to have every player playing as best as they possibly can.
Hmm.
And that either one either
Yeah,
team in round one, whether it's the Devils or Carolina, is going to be a challenge.
oh, I mean, absolutely. I mean, we're
And
not expecting any easy series to come out of these playoffs in the East whatsoever, right? But as good as this team is on paper, like I said many times, this is the time of the year, this final stretch of the season, where you really have to start feeling really good about your team. Regardless of how good those teams are, we know it's not going to be easy, but you want to enter round one at least feeling good about yourself. I as good as the Rangers might play in this final stretch, you're not going to feel super, super confident playing either one of those teams. It's just not going to happen. I mean, they could lose 3 or 4 games in this final stretch and dominate in all their wins, and you probably still won't think you're going to sweep either the Devils or the Hurricanes. So,
no, and especially because they're likely going to have home ice, you're either going to have to
yeah,
walk in game 1 of the playoffs, assuming you stay in the third spot in the Metro and don't have to don't have to go play Boston.
yeah, yeah.
Please, for the love of God, don't do that. You're going to go into game 1. If it's against the Hurricanes, it's game 1 in their house, in the place you eliminated them last season after they probably should have won that series.
Hmm.
or you're going to go play the Devils, who you despise with every fiber of your being, and they despise you with every fiber of their being, in their house after 6-year playoff drought for the Devils, 6 or 7.
Yeah, yeah,
Like
and
it's
and
you're
the
going to
Devils have
get
had the Rangers number recently too, so it's not like, I necessarily feel confident about the one-on-one matchup between the teams,
no, you're going to get punched. You're going to get punched first in either of those two games. It's going to be how do
Yeah.
you respond once you get there,
Hmm. Yeah.
which
And I mean, like I was saying, you're not going to feel confident against either one of those teams no matter what happens, but you just have to make sure you feel good about your team going into it. That's all. You know what I'm saying? Because if you already know that's going to be a hell of a series, round one, whoever it is, um, and on top of that, if you go into that feeling completely down about yourself, you are going to get swept. So this final stretch, they just have to click and they just have to find a way to really feel confident about whoever they're playing to at least, feel like they can win the series, whether it be in 6, 7 games. They just have to feel good about themselves, regardless of who they're playing.
can you imagine telling yourself before the season started that the Rangers were going to go out and get Tarasenko and Patrick Kane
Oh my
at the
God.
deadline,
Yeah.
and you're still going to be on the road in round one?
Yeah. I mean, it's wild enough that this has happened. Um, even after they got Tarasenko, I thought there was no chance of them getting pretty much anyone else because they had no money regardless. I didn't think they were getting any other player, let alone Patrick Kane.
I,
Um, and the theme of this entire episode is basically just talking about how the hell aren't they good? You know what I'm saying? Like it makes genuinely no sense. Like we could talk about, we could put the blame on any of these players. It doesn't matter. They have the guys to win the whole thing. So they have to click here, and I don't know how they've struggled 5v5 with this lineup. It makes genuinely no sense to
you
me.
think a part of it could be like a mental struggle for the individual players, knowing that if they don't go out and dominate a game, they're probably getting thrown around on the lines?
Um, yeah. I mean, especially, maybe more so for other players, or more for some players than others, I should say. Um, you know, it's Patrick Kane. He's been tossed around this lineup since he's been here, and I feel like he's been on the same team his whole career. He comes over here, he expects to play with Panarin and doesn't expect any line changes, and I feel like he feels as though if he doesn't have a point in the game, he's gonna be bumped up or down regardless of who he's playing with. So that could mess with his confidence. And I mean, in terms of his offensive zone turnovers and stuff, those are going to get amplified when he feels like he absolutely has to make a play.
Yeah.
He's you can't he's already a risky player in the offensive zone as it is, and when he feels like he has to score or get an assist, that's when the turnovers are going to happen more. I mean, him, not only just him, I feel like anybody from the kid line, I feel like their confidence might have been hurt a little bit now that they've all been jumped around the lineup in these past few games. They obviously haven't been on that, extreme hot streak like they were, in a couple weeks ago, but yeah, I didn't see any reason to break them up whatsoever, and I feel like now they're getting tossed around the lineup a lot, and that chemistry goes away, and it's all just a huge mess. So the line changes definitely need to stop. I feel like that if we had bullet points of kind of a Christmas list, that would be number one. I mean, I think every Rangers fan would say that.
It's fascinating that the thing we want most is just nothing. It
Yeah,
literally what we want
yeah.
most is to stop. Just leave it, please.
Yeah, and I feel like it's a simple ask. I mean, it's not like they work. I mean, it worked once in that Carolina game where Panarin scored 4 goals. It worked once. The success rate is literally 1%. So I don't know why this keeps happening, and it just isn't going to stop happening. So we'll see. But I mean, like I said before, we're probably going to be halfway through a playoff series talking about why the lines are being changed constantly. It's just going to keep happening. So there's not really much of a point in complaining about it.
I hate that you're correct.
Like, it's gonna happen. We're probably gonna be sitting here like game 5, in a pivotal game, being like, "Man, they couldn't score tonight. I wonder. I can't believe they keep changing the lines." Like, that's where we're at.
I can't wait to be in Game 5 of the Devil series and like, man, Mott with Kane just hasn't looked good these past few nights.
Yeah. Who would have thought that they wouldn't have clicked together?
The greatest mystery in the history of the New York Rangers.
Yeah, yeah. So I mean, yeah, we pretty much covered, all the bases from this weekend. I mean, just to recap, Montreal was a mess, they got a win. The Sabres game was a mess, they got a win. Um, the Penguins game was a complete mess, and they almost won.
You got a point.
But they probably shouldn't have won any of these three. So at
Yeah.
least they're getting points. At least they're winning some games, but it's just not what you want to see from this lineup, especially this deep into the season. So we'll see. I mean, who knows? Maybe we'll come on here next week and they just won 4 of these games, against the Capitals, Penguins, and Predators, and they win all of them 8-0. Who knows what's going to happen? But as of right now, you definitely want to see some more from the team as a whole.
They absolutely. You've got to see it, and it's not from any one position. You've got to see it from every single position, every player, every line, every pair. Which the positive, nowhere to go but up.
Yeah.
Because this past little stretch, even dating back before that long break, you had the win in Philly that was a mess, the loss against Ottawa, the loss against Boston.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's been a time over the past 2 weeks for the New York Rangers.
Yeah, it's definitely been interesting. I mean, obviously, you'd expect them to slow down after that, 24-4 run they were on.
That's sustainable for exactly one team.
Yeah. I mean, obviously you'd expect them to slow down, but you don't want to completely free fall either. So,
Yeah.
I mean, like I said, we pretty much covered everything. It's just a matter of this is the week where it's kind of, put up or shut up. They could either completely put the Penguins to bed in the standings, or they could fall to the wild card at the end of this week. Who knows? So, we'll see. I feel like it's not going to be much of an in between. I feel like it's going to be completely one way or the other in terms
there
of that.
is
So
no reality
we'll
where they go 2-2 this week. You're going 4-0 or like 1-3.
Yeah. I mean,
we get on here.
Hopefully they click, but it's easier said than done, I guess.
The next time we talk, it is either going to be talking about giving us the cup now, why are we playing the playoffs, or it's going to be a very depressed week.
I mean, obviously, we just spent 5 minutes before talking about, how could you feel confident either way, no matter who you're playing in the playoffs. But if they go 4-0 this week and they're all dominant wins, my bias is going to come out. I'm gonna be saying we're gonna sweep either one of them for sure. So. Yeah, so I mean, that's pretty much it. Like I said, pretty much covered everything from this weekend, a little bit of the Montreal game, and I guess we'll reconvene in a week and hope that our season isn't over.
That would be ideal. All right.
Yeah.
Well, thank you all for listening and coming out with us. We will see you in a week from now, hopefully discussing the season being back on track and better than ever. Until next time, I'm Weston, and that's Evan. Have a good week, and as always, go Rangers.
Go Rangers, guys.